Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, January 24th, 2022, we are continuing our coverage of the crisis between Ukraine and Russia, and obviously the West as well. But as of today, you look at the headlines and you think World War III is about to break out. And I guess the question is it? Or is it not? And at this point, us at MFAN, I would really not be surprised either way, tell you the truth. We could see a limited incursion by the Russians into Ukraine. We could see an all-out possible invasion with the intent of seizing the entirety of Ukraine by the Russian Federation. And but again, would not also be surprised if in fact we observed nothing at all. And again, part of that is just the distrust that I personally have with certain aspects of the mainstream media and its reporting. But let's look at some of these reports coming in from around the world about the ongoing crisis. So first, we'll just go straight down the headlines here. Let's see here. UATV. Russia moves against Ukraine. Latest updates. GB News. Russia invasion of Ukraine imminent, warns Defense Committee chair as Western powers run out of road. Newsweek. Chinese military jets fly near Taiwan as U.S. distracted by Ukraine. It's a little interesting. Just Security. As Putin lines Ukraine border with Russian troops, is there a China factor? ? Sky News. West getting ready for the worst as prospect of Russian invasion grows. Again, Sky News. Let's see here. PBS Online. U.S. orders families of Ukraine embassy to leave country as war fears mount. Let's see. What else do we have here? Let's see. NATO press release. Secretary General discusses Russian military buildup. NATO's open door policy with Finland and Sweden. Let's see. Radio Free Europe. Ukraine Foreign Minister. Euro-Atlantic security will be decided in Ukraine. And it just kind of goes on. The Ukraine, the national U.S. says 127,000 Russian troops are now at Ukraine border. The Telegraph from out of UK, Monday evening, UK news brief. Boris Johnson, bloody invasion, warning to Russia over Ukraine. Biden's Ukraine problem, National Review. And yeah, it just goes on and on. And earlier there was more reports coming in about the possible deployment of additional U.S. forces. We have seen in these news blurps anywhere from 1 to 5,000 additional U.S. forces possibly being deployed to Romania, and then obviously also the Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. So again, it would also appear that the Biden administration is starting to change its stance a bit in terms of its deployment strategy. And it would appear that he is continuing to be consulted by the Defense Department in terms of what the United States should do or should not do. I would say at this point, moving forces into the Baltics is probably not a very wise decision, unless you're, again, looking for some sort of reforger operation, which would be a huge escalation for at least the Russian side. But moving maybe a heavy brigade, or who knows what they're thinking about moving into the Baltics. But anything less than a heavy brigade is probably not prudent. And why do I say that? Well, if things start to really turn south and we see heavy fighting take place in Ukraine, and as we know, fighting sometimes can expand and widen. And if we see that take place and we see some sort of eventual move by the Russians into the Baltics, As again, in game is if Putin seizes Ukraine, then the West is going to reinforce the Baltics. And then the question is the Russians going to tolerate that? Do they want that sort of situation where they're maybe having anywhere from 1 to 3 heavy brigades stationed both in Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, and all 3 of the Baltic states? So I think the answer to that would be no. And then at some point, quite possibly, we would see an operation by the Russians into the Baltic state. Again, if this really lets loose and we start to see heavy fighting, I think that is a definite possibility. Now, having such limited forces of the United States in the Baltics, again, would probably do more harm than good. I understand that it is a measure in which the United States is basically daring the Russians to enter the Baltics and daring the Russians to engage NATO forces and especially forces of the United States. Now, with that being said, if Russia commits itself fully to war, it's really not going to care. The Western outlook on armed conflict and war is much different than the Russian outlook on conflict and war. So because the West feels one way, does not mean that the Russians feel the same way in terms of a trip line or something like that, in terms of those U.S. forces in the Baltics. And I think you have to look at Russian history. And the Russians are not adverse to major war. Again, if you look at the Winter War that took place in Finland over territory aspirations of Joseph Stalin, and they fought the Finns in that Winter War and sustained huge amounts of casualties. And that was a case where indeed you had active Russian aggression. So the concept that Russia has never invaded anybody is obviously far from true. I mean, we've seen the Russians engage in combat against the Finns. Prior to World War II, we've seen them engage in combat against the Japanese in northern Manchuria. So again, they will fight, and again, based on the sheer number of casualties that the Russians took in World War II, not just in the Finnish War. I mean, that was a horrendous, brutal war with tens of thousands of casualties on both sides. And again, it was a winter war. Joe Stalin invaded Finland in the middle of the winter. So again, the idea that they won't, and something is making them is persuading them not to attack, simply illogical. Again, they look at war differently than we do in the West, and again, I believe their tolerance for casualties is much different than us in the West, and they will fight, and a few thousand American troops in the Baltics, if that comes to fruition, if the Russians decide to move, is not going to stop them. And at the same time, just how would that look on national TV to see hundreds of American troops surrendering to Russian forces in the Baltics? Because that would happen. If the United States moves just a few thousand forces into the Baltics, and the Russians decide to move on the Baltics en masse, they're going to take the Baltics, and those American forces are either going to surrender or die in place. Most likely, they're going to surrender after some initial fighting. But how would that look? And again, that's just the ramifications of allowing Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania into NATO, and compounding that, the atrophy of the NATO force construct. But right now, we're really looking at what's going to happen in Ukraine. And again, I don't think anybody knows at this point But all indications, if you trust the mainstream media, again, it appears that World War III is about to break out, and there's going to be some very, very heavy fighting taking place, at least within the confines of eastern Ukraine. And again, you can't rule out, given the alleged force moves. I'm not there on the ground. I'm not in Russia. I can't physically see what Russia is deploying. I can only rely on what the media is reporting to the rest of the world, and then you have to take it at face value. Is it true or not? And again, based on the past performances of some of these media outlets, very difficult to say, because obviously they're not there either. They're not in Smolensk with these Russian units. They're not in Belgorod with these Russian units. So we really don't know. And quite frankly, we really don't know until if and when this Russian operation kicks off. Now, when that Russian operation does kick off, or if it does kick off, we'll know a lot more. I would anticipate that if Russia's true intent is more expansive than just the far eastern separatist areas and taking those, and possibly Kharkiv, my apologies. We'll probably see a 1991 style initial air campaign where they try to degrade both some of the ground assets and air defense abilities of the Ukrainian military, and strike at command and control nodes in and throughout the Ukraine. So if we see some sort of shock and awe with a massive cruise missile strike, then we know the Russians mean business. If we don't see that, and we see an initial roll into eastern Ukraine without the initial attack, a widespread attack, you hear that multi-domain strategy, then obviously it may be more of a localized operation. But we're going to continue watching this very, very closely, and we're going to bring you the facts by which we see the facts. And we're not going to toe either side's line of mantra, and until we actually know what's physically happening on the ground. So that's it. Have a good day, everybody.